Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. Private trash companies aren't supposed to operate in the early morning hours, but a WTTW News investigation finds violators are rarely cited. Police disciplinary hearings behind closed doors. Leaders of the police union and an oversight group shared their thoughts. And why animal shelters are experiencing an increase in stray animals and euthanasia. But first, some of today's top stories. The trial for the alleged Highland Park shooter will happen much sooner after a surprise day in court. Robert Crimo III told the court that he'd be representing himself and that he'd be invoking his right to a speedy trial. This moves his trial date up to late February 2024 instead of what was expected to be 2025. Crimo III faces 117 charges, including 21 counts of murder from the July 4th mass shooting that killed 7 people and wounded dozens of others. Today's hearing was the first since his father, Robert Crimo Jr., pleaded guilty to 7 misdemeanor counts for recklessly aiding his son in obtaining firearms. There's more of this story on our website. People leaving the custody of Cook County Jail will soon have something else to take with them on the way out, a new state ID. The Secretary of State and Cook County Sheriff's offices are teaming up to issue the cards, the first partnership of its kind for county jail.
It's critical to civic engagement and social enfranchisement. A state ID is needed to apply for housing, a job, government benefits, participate in educational programming, and so much more.
Advocates say the move helps people overcome barriers to getting an ID after being impacted by the criminal legal system, like difficulty obtaining Social Security cards and birth certificates, as well as time at and transportation to the Secretary of State's office. Officials say they will start with people who've either previously applied for a state ID or driver's license or have access to the needed documents before expanding to all individuals in the jail's custody. Drivers heading into the city from the north side might have noticed a much smoother commute today. The Illinois Department of Transportation says all lanes and ramps on the inbound Kennedy Expressway are fully reopened. The expressway has been under construction to update and restore parts of that stretch between the junction and Ohio. But enjoy it while you can. The next phase of construction means closures for the reversible express lanes, expected to begin in spring 2024. Up next, Paris shuts and the debate over police disciplinary hearings right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
If the Chicago police superintendent has recommended a cop be fired for serious accused misconduct like an unjustified shooting, the case goes to the Chicago Police Board. That board carries out a trial-like process fully in view of the public. But recently, a judge ruled Chicago police should have the right to have those cases heard by an independent arbitrator instead, behind closed doors. The City Council committee has rejected that provision of a new police contract, as a majority of alderpeople say it's a major step backward in police reform. But Chicago's police union fought for the new ruling and says it's only fair. And joining us are John Catanzara, President of the Fraternal Order of Police, and Anthony Driver, President of the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability. Welcome, both of you, to Chicago Tonight here together. Mr. Catanzara, for 60 years, the Chicago Police Board, a board appointed by the mayor, has had the final say on whether or not cops are fired for these serious misconduct allegations. You fought to get this judge's ruling that these cases could be instead heard by an independent arbitrator. How come?
Well, let me just clarify. This wasn't much of a fight, to be honest with you. The provision stated always it was by agreement. The Illinois, statute is very clear that arbitration is the basically remedy for all of this, unless it's by agreement. So for decades, that's been by agreement that the police board would hear these termination cases. The union always had the ability to opt out of that agreement. It wasn't like we fought for it. We just said we're done. We're exercising an option clause. And again, it's been repeated examples where the police board has not exactly been fair especially since the Laquan McDonald murder.
And it's Judge Edwin Benn that agreed to this arbitration clause, the arbitrator. Anthony Driver, what would the impact be on police and police accountability if it went this route?
Yeah, I think this would actually be a decision that would set us back decades. This would drive this process behind closed doors. Recently, we saw the police board, which is now, by the way, not appointed solely by the mayor. Our commission, which is publicly accountable, actually is the appointing body, who then is confirmed by the mayor and the city council, which is very different than it was done in years past. But you have a right to public comment. You have a right to read their decisions. You have a right to attend meetings. You can go back and look at recordings. The public has a right to know when it goes before the police board. If it goes before an arbitrator, it goes behind closed doors. And again, this is an issue that affects less than 1% of the police force. Only the most egregious of offenses go before the police board.
Because we should clarify, some of the less serious offenses can be sent to an arbitrator like this. But what about the contention that other public employees have this right? They're afforded this right to go to arbitration.
Well, one, that's not true. It doesn't even work that way at CPS. And at CPS, a neutral party or arbitrator makes a decision and it goes before the Chicago Public School Board. But when you are in a profession that has to be held to a higher standard, where you can take someone's life or liberty, where you can be a lawyer who's governed by the ARDC, a doctor who's governed by the State Medical Board, the bar has to be higher. You have to be publicly accountable.
What about that, Mr. Catanzara? I mean, you are public employees that have the power to kill. Shouldn't you be held to a higher standard for misconduct?
Those are criminal charges. That has nothing to do with the discipline process, number one. The statute is clear. It doesn't make any carve out for any specific union except for the fact of interest arbitration basically being the trade-off for the no strike ability. If they want to talk about giving us the ability to strike, well then let's have that conversation if they want to put us on par with everybody else. But that's not it. We were afforded the ability to go to arbitration in lieu of striking. Period. Full stop.
And this is part of the provision that City Council shot down as part of the new union agreement. Mr. Catanzara, you yourself have been the subject of misconduct complaints. You resigned before you thought you might be fired. Do you think this process was fair to you?
It absolutely was not, which is why I resigned. There was motion after motion that was denied by the hearing officer, literally, and it's a routine. When we talk about transparency, let's talk about honest transparency here with the police board. Just today, the police board hearing, I just got a call from our attorney earlier this afternoon. At the police board hearing, a status hearing on a very basically famous case, they were talking about what the path forward was going to be as far as public access. Our attorney said, fine, if it's going to be public access, then let's just not have a link so people can listen. Let's have a video, basically, ability for anybody anywhere in the country to watch this. It was crickets in the room. The police board doesn't even do that. They don't even have these in person anymore. Everything is by Zoom, with just the attorneys primarily. We had to have our general counsel file a letter to the police board to have our first vice president allowed access to the link to one of the hearings for our officers that we represent. So this transparency argument at the police board.
So you feel that there's been impediments here if you're on the police side. What about that? Has the police board process been fair to all parties?
The city council, the commission that I'm the president of, these are governed by the Open Meetings Act. It's mandatory that those all are made public. The minutes are recorded. You can view them via live stream. You have a right to public comment, just like any other public body in the state. It's governed by the Open Meetings Act. It is absolutely transparent.
All right, so independent arbitrators, John Catanzara, according to an IG's report, they side with police 78% of the time, again, on these lower level misconduct cases that they already hear. So the point here that you think you're going to get a much more favorable outcome with this process.
Fair is not favorable. Fair is right. We all talk about, transparency and accountability and all of that stuff. But when you take the emotion out of it, and a lot of these people on the police board, and they just named somebody, mind you, who talk about bias. This person sat on the parole board. He had not once but twice voted to parole a cop killer. Now, that's a guy that's now hearing discipline cases at the police board for our members. It's egregious. So again, arbitrators hear the facts, they take the emotion and the public sentiment out of it, and they simply go with what's right and what's wrong.
Period. Can I respond to that, Paris?
Sure, go ahead.
Arbitrators are not publicly held accountable. In fact, they don't even have to reside in the city of Chicago. Right now, there's only 5 arbitrators who hear these cases. 4 of them are white males. It's not a very diverse group. They're not publicly held accountable. You can't go back and look up their voting record, their discipline record. You have no access to any of those things. Talk about accountability, talk about fairness. This is one person hearing the most egregious cases that are brought before this board or this person, and they don't even have to live in this state.
All right, well, because of the complicated nature of this provision, it's going to require a 3/5 majority of council to reject. So either way, I mean, if you don't have the votes on council, you're going to go to court, right?
Well, can I just back up about
Sure.
the part where he talked about these arbitrators not being fair or not being diverse, whatever the question may be. There's a provision in Cook County for judges who basically don't do their job. They get basically recalled every 2 years when their name's on the ballot. The same thing is pretty much for these arbitrators. Every year, these are arbitrators by agreement with the city and the FOP. The city has the ability to strike an arbitrator they think is not being fair to the process. That just doesn't happen very often.
All right, so both parties have to agree on who the arbitrators are. So Anthony Driver, is there some kind of compromise here where maybe this does go to arbitration instead of the police board, but maybe it's done in a more transparent or public manner?
I hope so. What we're fighting for is a value system.
Because we should mention that whatever happens in city council, I mean, the arbitrator ruled for this provision, so the FOP is going to go to court. And there'll be some kind of legal battle. So what would a compromise look like?
Yeah, a compromise, in my opinion, would be something that allows transparency to be injected into this process, to allow accountability from the public to be injected into this process. We live in a city that has a very bad history when it comes to policing. These folks go out there and put their lives on the line. They do a very important job, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for them. And I truly mean that. But there also is a level of accountability and public knowledge that has to be adhered to, and that's what we're fighting for.
John Catanzara, say it does go this route, would you support some kind of public, transparent information that the public could have access to as these cases get adjudicated by an arbitrator? You know,
the sad reality is the mayor put his thumb on the scale here. I was initially supposed to give testimony in the witness box on Thursday, so I can give the other side of the example of what was going on in arbitration mediation. That was denied. Literally that morning, it changed. If I was allowed to speak, you would have heard many examples on how we proposed. And again, we have the high ground here. We have the statute on our side. We never.
You're proposing some kind of compromise here where there could be a public process.
Correct. We never had to give an inch, but we offered it anyway. And the city basically rejected it because it was their proposal or nothing at all at that point.
Very quickly, what do you think is going to happen on Wednesday? Again, council, if they're going to reject this provision, they need to do it with a 3/5 vote, so 30 council members.
Well, we're going to fight hard for those votes, and we won't stop there. But based on what John is saying, there's some daylight here. So I'm actually hoping to have conversations with him about how we can fix this.
So maybe a lot could change by Wednesday.
I hope so.
All right.
He's laughing. I hope so.
John Catanzara, there's hope everywhere. John Catanzara, Anthony Driver, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Shaking hands there, very good. Up next, what's being done about illegal early morning garbage pickups? Find out right after this.
Despite complaints from across Chicago, private trash haulers making pickups during city-mandated quiet hours rarely face citations for the illegal pickups. That's according to a WTTW News analysis of city data from 2022 and 23. But a new measure aimed at curbing the problem means sleep-deprived Chicagoans may have some hope in sight. WTTW News reporter Nick Blumberg joins us now with more. Nick, how big of an issue is this?
Well, that's a great question, Brandis. We've been reporting on this issue since June, and we discovered pretty early on that the city hasn't had a uniform way of tracking or enforcing quiet hours for private garbage and recycling companies. Now, they aren't supposed to be making noisy pickups between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. We've gotten complaints from residents around Chicago. Some call 311, some call 911, some call their alderperson's office. Through a Freedom of Information Act request, we obtained 311 complaints from January of last year till October of this year and found 140 complaints from 32 of the city's 50 wards. Many complained of trucks coming during the 4, 5, and 6 a.m. hours. A few even complained of pickups as early as between midnight and 3 a.m.
Ouch. How often are companies being punished?
According to information we obtained from the Chicago Police Department, just 5 times in the last couple of years, and those appear to have been possibly repeat offenders. Records show 2 tickets in the same location in Noble Square and 3 tickets at the same location in Avondale. Now, some of the scofflaws may have cleaned up their act without a citation. Until recently, a common way to address this problem has been for the local streets and sand ward superintendent to call their counterparts at private companies that get complained about and remind them of the law. After that, it was up to CPD to step in with a citation, but the 311 records show plenty of frustrated, angry Chicagoans making reports about repeat offenders. One of the most frequently complained about was waste management. In a statement, Waste Management tells WTTW News, "We take all complaints seriously. Our team works with the city and the alderperson's offices to address and resolve complaints that are received." Flood Brothers and Lakeshore Recycling Services also appear frequently in the complaint logs. Neither company responded to a request for comment.
Nick, you mentioned the city's approach to stopping illegal pickups until recently. What changed?
That's right. First Ward Alderman Daniel Laspada has been pushing for tougher enforcement for a while now. He told us that noise complaints are among the most frequent problems reported in his ward. Laspada was the lead sponsor of an ordinance that gives citation writing power for illegal pickups to streets and sand and requires private trash haulers turn over their GPS and other tracking data for truck routes upon request. That way, city staffers can verify complaints about pre-dawn pickups and write those companies a ticket. That ordinance passed unanimously last month and took immediate effect. Streets and Sand told us residents should send in complaints to 311 so the department can follow up. And hopefully Brandis, Chicagoans tired of rude awakenings from garbage trucks will get a little bit of relief.
I'm hoping that is the case for them. Nick Blumberg, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And you can read Nick's full story on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news. Up next, a rise in euthanasia at Chicago's animal shelter. But first, a look at the weather. Visitors to the city's animal shelter on the Lower West Side are met with rows of kennels filled with dogs and cats. But for many of those animals, their lives will end there. The city's shelter is seeing an increase of stray animals coming through its doors since the COVID pandemic, up 47% so far this year compared to 2020. This is leading to more animals being euthanized. Joining us to discuss what they've seen are Susan Capello, acting director of Chicago Animal Care and Control, Paula Faceas, co-founder of Paws Chicago, and Cynthia Bathurst, CEO and founder of Safe Humane Chicago. Thanks to the three of you for joining us. Susan Capello, let's start with you, please. What is causing this increase in animals coming into the shelter?
Well, there are a lot of different reasons right now happening. So during the pandemic, you quoted 2020, some numbers. We were down as low as 30 animals in our shelter during the pandemic. That has never been seen in the Chicago shelter before, ever. So right now, people are returning back to work. There are issues with veterinary care, with money. Everything is so much more expensive. We're really seeing people turn in their animals because they can't afford them anymore. They can't care for them anymore as they're returning to work. So those are a couple of the major reasons.
And of course, we all remember during the pandemic, everybody was at home and they wanted a little buddy to keep them company. So there were a lot of pets being adopted at the time. Paula, what are the trends that you all are seeing as a result of the pandemic or since the pandemic?
Well, basically, what we're seeing is that we need to help animal care and control more and more. We have been doing that for 25 years, and that's been our number one focus. But since we've been seeing so many animals coming in, and truly, shockingly, the animals that we've never seen before, French bulldogs and things that, I think what's happening is a lot of backyard breeders aren't making money doing this now, and they're just turning them in. So, and I'm getting calls from, even like last night, a vet hospital up in Des Plaines, 4 lab were dropped off, and they do the intake for that community. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they said we haven't seen so much. So it's a lot of breeders that were making money, and now they're not making because people aren't buying them.
Susan, how does Chicago compare to other cities across the country?
Well, we did some comparison this afternoon, and we are pretty much in line with other nationwide municipal animal control facilities. So we're all seeing very high intake. We're all seeing a little lower numbers in our adoptions, but it's just those intakes. It's really, and it's nationwide. It's not just us. We compared ourselves to Milwaukee, and we're about equal with them, probably taking in anywhere between 13,000 and 15,000 animals this year.
Cynthia, why do shelters feel they have to turn to euthanasia? At what point does the shelter have to make those decisions?
Well, that's an individual decision. It depends on the type of shelter that they are, the type of community they're in. So that really is largely, I think, a shelter defined decision, which frankly, I'm not really sure I know. I'd like to think about that a little bit more, but sure. Yeah, it depends on the individual shelter, and it's different when you're a nonprofit and you can either open or close your doors or choose certain kinds of animals compared to a city or a government facility that basically has to take every animal that comes to the door.
And to that point, Susan, what are sort of your responsibilities? Because I think in our research from WTTW News, you're seeing a lot of strays versus people bringing an animal to you, and kind of what is the city's responsibility when you with strays versus someone calling saying, I need to give you my animal because I can't take care of it anymore?
So animal care and control, we are out there to protect public safety. So public safety is one of our main things, but we do follow the Municipal Code of Chicago, which requires us to pick up stray animals from the street. We do have a lot of different programs in place. If we pick up an animal that has a microchip or a tag on it, we will try to do that research and return them right then and there instead of bringing that animal to the shelter. That's why it's very important to make sure that your pet has a tag or microchip in them so that we can return those pets back home. But yes, stray animal intake has increased over the past couple of years.
Paula, how does PAWS work with the city to ease this burden?
Well, we transfer about 40% of the animals that leave animal care and control come to PAWS directly. They have another maybe 100 rescues that also take, but we are by far the largest transfer, and because of this situation, obviously we're all on red alert and we're all really focusing, and we've upped our transfers and we're upping programs that we're announcing now with the city that we're going to be, PAWS will actually be positioning people at animal care and control. Some of our staff will be there helping to increase volunteers, increase adoptions, and we also have the medical center that's about 1.5 miles away. So when they have any kind of emergency, they call us and we come right over and get them.
Cynthia, what are some of the barriers to foster or adopt right now?
I'm not sure that I know all of them, but the big one are housing issues, insurance issues, a lot of the economic issues, who's going to pay for the food, the care, the veterinary issues, and then others is just getting people educated and understand what fostering means, how much it costs to adopt and keep an animal, and that's largely what Safe Humane Chicago likes to do, is to provide education to young people, to young adults, what's involved in doing that, where can you get help, because we have so many organizations. We're only just a little drop in the bucket here. So many organizations who will provide help, and we need to marshal those resources and help families and communities tell us what they need and help them get what they need.
To that point, what do future pet owners or current pet owners, what do they need to know about this situation? Because obviously, as we said, during the pandemic, there was a period of time where everybody was getting a pet, and then we saw a period of time where a lot of people were having to relinquish those pets because they couldn't take them on for whatever reason anymore. What do people need to know?
I think people need to know what's going on in their communities so that they can get help within them, and what nonprofits and other organizations can provide to them, where they can go for help. They also need to understand what animals need. It's sort of like animals went from the barnyard to the backyard to the bedroom, and they're all family members, and so people expect a lot more and want to provide more, and that means money and resources. So they need to understand what those are, and they need to understand that when they start having difficulties, there are plenty of organizations that will help them. Safe Humane Chicago does training things. We're not a rescue or a shelter like PAWS or Chicago Animal Care and Control. We're more like a Friends of group, and we have a Friends of Chicago Animal Care and Control. What we are is a community well-being organization. So how do we go into communities, bring folks in, show them what the shelter's like, show them what they need to do, and then provide programming.
Provide them some of that education.
And training.
Susan, I know that you all have also struggled with staffing. Obviously, volunteers are very important to both of your organizations. Why has that been a challenge with ensuring enough staff and, of course, volunteers?
So staffing is a big one with us, especially the critical positions like veterinarian and certified vet techs. They're few and far between. It seems like everybody didn't go to school again during the pandemic, so we're struggling hiring those positions. With the City of Chicago, there's a blanket way to hire for all city departments. So we do fall under that blanket. There needs to be a posting of the position for a certain number of days. Then there's the interview process and then the hiring process, which does take a little long. It turns people away because of the length of time. So we do lose people that way. But we are continually posting our positions and getting people hired as quickly as we can. As far as volunteers, they go through a very similar process as our new hires do. Not as in-depth, but our volunteers, sometimes they do fall through the crack, but they also don't realize what they're getting into when they come to the shelter.
So
they think they're gonna they're gonna cuddle with puppies and kittens, and
it's probably a lot of cleaning.
The bigger dogs need a lot more cuddling, so that's really what it is.
Okay, all right. Best of luck to all of you. That we'll have to leave it there, though. Susan Capello, Paul Faceas, and Cynthia Bathurst. Thanks you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's our show for this Monday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. The prosecution prepares to wrap up in the corruption trial of former Alderman Ed Burke. We'll have the latest. And City Council weighs whether police should be able to have disciplinary hearings behind closed doors. Our Spotlight Politics team on that and more. And we leave you with a look at the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Des Plaines, one of the largest pilgrimages in the country that takes place beginning tonight. For all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, wishing all a happy and healthy holiday season.